Welcome everyone to Hogvillenet YouTube Live. We can call it a pregame. We're a day early. Arkansas Razorbacks, UConn Huskies, Sweet 16 in the desert, Las Vegas, baby. That's on Thursday. So we're coming in here at 6:20. In about 24 hours, Arkansas is going to be tipping up. So we're a day early. We'll call it a preview. We can call it a pregame show. But welcome to Hogvillenet YouTube Live. We know we do the post games. We've done it all year. We've done some pregames, including we did a pregame game day when Arkansas matched up with Kansas on Saturday in the round of 32. We know how that went. Two number one seeds gone in the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. I keep saying this is an event minus a great team, and when you see two one seeds bounce in the first weekend, one of those courtesy to the Arkansas Razorbacks. Back-to-back years, Arkansas has done that, by the way. Last year it was Gonzaga. That wasn't in the Sweet 16, the regional semifinals. But that's where we are now, regional semifinals. It's the second weekend. This has been a season of ups and downs, roller coaster for Arkansas. Did not meet expectations in the regular season. We could say that. It was a team that came in with national top 10 rankings, 3 5-stars, a lot of projections. And plans and expectations to be a Final Four kind of team. And the beauty of it is, in the postseason, everything that happened before doesn't matter anymore. And Arkansas is still clinging to the hopes and real possibilities of advancing to a Sweet 16. Now that they're in the Sweet 16, advancing beyond this weekend, which they haven't done in a long time, to get to that Final Four. We know it's back in the 90s in the Nolan Richardson era. Eric Musselman in his 4 seasons, when you look at back-to-back Elite Eights the previous 2 years, Arkansas has now obviously gotten the Sweet 16 3 years in a row. If Arkansas can win and defeat UConn, we're going to go through these matchups. We're going to talk a lot about it. But if Arkansas can win this game, it gets back to the Elite Eight, third consecutive season. That's never happened in program history. When we go back to Nolan's heyday, his best stretch of success, Arkansas had 2 Sweet 16 runs that bookended in between 2 back-to-back seasons of getting to the national title game. So those teams obviously went beyond the Elite Eight. They went beyond the Final Four. They got into the national title game. They won the title in 93-94 with a win over Duke. They lost the title game against UCLA the following season. And then bookending those 2 years were the Sweet 16s. But never has Arkansas had back-to-back Elite Eights or 3 consecutive Elite Eights. Another way to say it is 3 consecutive regional finals. Arkansas is in the West region. So right now you've got 2 Sweet 16 games. All of the seeds, as wild as this NCAA tournament's been with upsets, the West has been the most sound, except for Arkansas's upset of Kansas. When you look at where things stand right now, Arkansas is playing the 4 seed, as the 8 seed playing the 4. The 4 in UConn beat the 5, St. Mary's. When you look at the other part of the West region bracket, it's a 3-2 matchup, 2 UCLA, 3 being Gonzaga. I mentioned Gonzaga. Arkansas knocked off, the Bulldogs a year ago as the overall number 1 seed in the Sweet 16. So Arkansas keeps making history. Arkansas is one of only 4 teams historically to knock off 1 seeds in their own region in back-to-back seasons. Only 4 programs have done it. When you look at history, you have to go back to Duke in the late 80s. UCLA in the 2000s, and then Butler did it. But Arkansas is one of 4 programs to do that. Arkansas last year was, I think, the first program to have ever knocked off a number 1 ranked team in the regular season, then knock off the number 1 ranked and overall number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament in the same season. So Arkansas is now looking for more history to get to those back-to-back Elite Eights. 3 consecutive would be a big mark in program history, and there's not a lot of schools out there that probably have done that. I didn't look that up before I came on today, but just know with Arkansas's rich basketball history, the fact the Razorbacks haven't done it tells you that's an accomplishment. Again, we talk about Arkansas's problem areas this year beyond injuries, losing guys like Trevin Brazile for the end of non-conference play, and we knew he wasn't coming back with the knee injury and surgery. Nick Smith Jr., who missed 2 months, 13 games, and is still, dealing with stuff and playing, basically playing his 12th game when everybody else is in the 30s, so he's trying to, ramp it up and did not have a good first couple of rounds. We're going to go through a lot of the different players and matchups here, but just trying to, kind of reset where everything is to this point, because again, I don't think anybody expected Arkansas if it won its first round game against Illinois, to knock off Kansas. Not very many people did. I think Arkansas fans had hopes of it. I thought the matchup was good when you looked at it from an athleticism, size, depth, all of those things. Arkansas matched up with Kansas. Some of the playing styles, but some of the things Kansas did, I thought would be problematic for the Hogs. And Arkansas did have some issues at times, but neutralized those and played to their strengths eventually. We're going to talk about all those things that Arkansas is going to have to continue to do. But let's look at it. What's worked for Arkansas that wasn't working in the regular season? Because in the regular season, Arkansas had double-digit leads in the second half against teams like Alabama, Baylor, away from home. I mean, Missouri, Vanderbilt, a lot of teams at Arkansas, Texas A&M. When you look in the SEC tournament and on the road against A&M, they did it twice against the team that finished second in the league and was in this NCAA tournament for a game. But what were the issues there versus what Arkansas has been able to solve in these last two games? And I think when you look at collectively how many different areas Arkansas was substandard typically and not consistent, they cleaned a lot of that up. They've been dominant on the glass in this NCAA tournament. Plus 16 collectively. They had an advantage, a sizable advantage against both Illinois and Kansas. When you look at the offensive glass, it's even more pronounced. I mean, when you look at those games on that offensive glass, Arkansas was +8 against Kansas and +8 against both teams on the old glass. And the second chance points really reflected that, especially against Kansas, 15-2. So when you talk about playing not like the challenger, but you're playing like the champion, like in boxing, you expect the guy that's expected to be aggressive to come in and take the fight and not play on its heels, but be aggressive. And I thought Arkansas has played that way when you look at the glass. Arkansas has also been shaky most of the year in turnovers. They haven't been perfect in this tournament, but they've been better than their opponents. So defensively, Arkansas is forcing turnovers. We're going to talk about the individual players that are keying into that. But Arkansas has won the turnover battle in back-to-back games, won the rebounding battle in back-to-back games. And then you add a third piece where Arkansas has not been very good, which is getting to the free throw line and converting at a winning percentage. When you're talking about postseason, you got to be better than 69%, which is what Arkansas was on the season coming in. But Arkansas's, it's been night and day at the free throw line. A lot of that has to do with Ricky Council, who's taken almost half of the team's free throws, or he's made almost half. He's been over 90% in this field in these two games, 21 of 23. But as a team, Arkansas has collectively also been better, going from 69%, almost 10 percentage points better when you connect both games. And so, they were over 75% against Illinois, finished that way, over 80% for the game against Kansas. And they've been really good at the free throw line late in those games when you've got to close them out. That's where they've gotten even better than those overall percentages. So I just talked about three things where if you went back to the regular season and even the SEC tournament, you couldn't say, looking at those 33 games, that Arkansas was typically and consistently better than its opponent in rebounding and dominant, turnovers, and then that free throw line. And that's meant everything in these two games. Arkansas is going to have some carryover. They don't necessarily have to dominate all three. And certainly UConn, to me, is a unique matchup and maybe Arkansas's toughest matchup to date in postseason. I think it probably is. When you're talking about Auburn, A&M, Illinois, and even Kansas is a 1 seed. Not much of a bench there. Arkansas dominated bench scoring. This UConn team has depth. It has a bench. It's got versatility in waves, whereas Kansas had versatility in certain players, but not in depth. And, Kansas was not a physical big team. Arkansas had a size advantage there. Arkansas had a quickness and athleticism advantage there. I apply that standard to both rounds, including Illinois. There's some things here when I look at this UConn team, when I talked about Arkansas' strengths, what has Arkansas done? The other thing that I haven't talked about is limiting the three-point shots. This is not a good three-point shooting team. Arkansas hasn't gotten better behind the arc. They haven't. But what has Arkansas done? Only 11 attempts throughout the game against Illinois. I keep saying, I harp on it, you need to be closer to 10 attempts per game from three than 15. Try to get it down around 10 and attack the paint, attack the glass, get to the free throw line. That's Arkansas' strength. They did that against Illinois. Arkansas did not start well with Kansas. In fact, through the first 28 minutes, almost 3 of your 4 quarters of play, Arkansas had taken 13 threes already. They were 2 of 13. In the last 12 minutes, and Arkansas was down 10 at that point. That's what they had to show for some of that. In the last 12 plus minutes of that game against Kansas, Arkansas took 2 threes. 2, made 1. That was a Jordan Walsh beauty that capped an 11-0 run that put Arkansas back in the lead 52-51. After they'd only led prior to that at 2-0. But they only took 2 threes in those last 12 minutes. In the meantime, down 10, they outscore in those last 12 minutes, Kansas, 31-20. So Arkansas started getting downhill. You saw Devo Davis attacking the paint. You saw Ricky Council attacking the paint and the rim. You saw Kamani Johnson all over that offensive glass and working to get stickbacks or keep the ball alive. You saw Jordan Walsh battling around the basket. He got some offensive rebounds. And trying to play tough guy around the basket. That's what you got to have. You've got to be aggressive. You've got to be throwing punches, not be a counter puncher if you're Arkansas. I think Arkansas's got to be aggressive, and I think that's why when you're aggressive and you're throwing headshots and body shots, and you're not waiting to see if you get hit first, that's how you dominate the glass. That's how you win turnover battles. Turnovers are 50-50 balls. Those are scrapping, deflections, just battling. That's how you get to the free throw line. Now you got to convert, but at least you're making, you're playing a game that does that. I think also being aggressive means not taking and settling for threes. It's not your team strength. And the more you do it, the less you take away from what is quality shots, which is getting downhill and maybe getting yourself to the free throw line. You got to put pressure on the officials and drive it in there. And so I think Arkansas, when I talk about being aggressive, that's what this team has done in 2 games, with the exception of a stretch where they took too many threes against Kansas. But they were doing other stuff. They were hitting the glass. They were still finding ways to get to the line. I thought they settled for too many threes, and that was part of why they got down by double digits. And then Arkansas was just the tougher team down the stretch. And the championship rounds, we're talking a little boxing analogies here. In those championship rounds, Arkansas really dominated, I thought. And give Kansas credit. That was a number 1 seed for a reason. Great season, Big 12 champ, first team All-American, all Big 12 player of the year. And we're going to talk about some things that some Razorbacks did to counter some of that. But Kansas hung in there. That was a battle. It went to the wire. And Arkansas was exceptional at the free throw line. And we talk about offensive rebounds. That play of the game in that one was the free throw that Council missed, the one that he missed. And Walsh spun around his guy, got to the ball, deflected it. The ball ricocheted and pinballed back to Ricky, who attacked the rim and got back to the free throw line. I thought Arkansas did a much better job. When I'm talking about being the aggressor, Arkansas had a 12-point lead late against Illinois and put the ball in deep freeze with 5 minutes to go. They almost paid for that. And there was another play of the game, which is another blue-collar aggressive play where Devo comes from behind, gets a steal, Ricky goes in transition and finishes. Arkansas's only basket in the last 5 minutes of that game. The rest of it was free throw line. But that basket extended a 5-point lead, 2 possessions to 3, and so it was tougher for Illinois. I thought Arkansas did a much better job against Kansas in a game where there was no cushion. It was back and forth and lead seesawing. I thought Arkansas did a much better job of attacking and not trying to play the clock and milk it down to shorten it. You don't need to do that. You've got to go do what works. And what works is getting downhill, get to that basket, and don't put yourself in a position where you're getting late in clock and you're tempted to take a three because that's all you've got left because the defense knows you're short on clock and they're going to dare you to take it. Arkansas was aggressive in attack. So that's what I'm talking about here. That's got to continue. Doesn't matter what the matchups are. Doesn't matter at this point. That's Arkansas' strength. That's the way the Razorbacks got to play. And I think Arkansas's got some advantages here. This is a UConn team that's got some size and savvy guys on the front line. Definitely some size. And we're going to go through players' names and all that. They got a lot of depth. They got some guys that can knock down threes. But when I look at UConn defensively, even though it's rated similar to Arkansas, top 10 to 20 adjusted defensive efficiency rating, according to Ken Palm, they're a good shot blocking team. They're good at keeping opponents' field goal percentages down. They're excellent defending the 3 line, but that's not Arkansas' strength anyway. When we talk about getting downhill, the more Arkansas does it, I still think at most positions, Arkansas's got an athleticism and not necessarily size on everybody, but I think there's quickness, overall athleticism, explosive. There's some things that Arkansas has edges in, and I think Arkansas's guards probably do a better job than what I've seen of UConn's guards in terms of playing bully ball. And I think you can attack that backcourt And even though they've got a good front line that can block some shots, if you keep going at them, they're going to pick up some fouls too. And you don't worry as much about getting your shot altered. You just keep attacking. Arkansas is going to have to do that, even against a team that's a good shot blocking team. I think that's an advantage for Arkansas on offense. I think Arkansas's got a chance to win the turnover battle again. Arkansas's going to have to really continue to minimize as much as possible the self-inflicted wounds. They've had them in both games. In both games, they've had them still, but they've won those battles. I think that's a battle that Arkansas can win. Not saying they will, but if they can keep it close and maybe win a little bit, then they're going to need to maybe see if they can get the Hogs can get in transition on some live ball turnovers, but at least stay competitive in fast break points, which they did against both Illinois and Kansas, but also win that turnover battle and points off turnovers. You got to execute when you get the ball back, because here's why. As good as Arkansas was on the glass, this is one of those teams that reminds me, when I look back at the SEC, some of these teams that were really good with offensive rebounds and overall on the glass. Teams like Alabama, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Arkansas lost its share of those battles. So here's the thing: even if you lose on the glass and you don't dominate like Arkansas has, even if you do that, and even if you want to stay close in some relative contact, you don't want to get blown out on the glass. A, B, you don't want to get overwhelmed in second chance point differential. In other words, giving up a lot of putbacks and things like that. But here's the problem with offensive rebounds. UConn's over 13 a game. This is a team that's eighth in the nation in offensive rebounding, over 13 a game. The problem is not necessarily the second chance points. You might be able to defend those putback opportunities. It's the fact that you've lost possession. You're not getting shots on goal. Puts more pressure on your offense when you do get the ball. And so even though this is a UConn team that scores a lot of points and plays with pace, the more they get offensive rebounds, whether they're putting those back and converting, it takes away opportunities for Arkansas. That's why I think Arkansas's got to stay competitive in both the turnover game and in rebounding. They don't necessarily have to win those, but they got to stay within close range. They've won both of those fairly significantly when you combine the two games against Illinois and Kansas, and they won both of those individually. This may be a game where they need to do that, but I think it doesn't. They don't have to necessarily. I think as long as the Hogs can stay close in those departments. Points in the paint, Arkansas, was +6 against Illinois, -4 against Kansas. Kind of a wash there because Arkansas was better than those teams at the free throw line. That's another thing about this UConn team. UConn shoots over 75% at the line. It's top 50 in the country. So you don't want to foul this team that most of their top scorers are converting at over 80%, including their big man. And we're going to talk about some of these individual guys, but we're kind of going through some things that I think is key. Arkansas's got to continue to attack on offense. Defensively, we haven't gotten into that because I'm going to get more specific. But on offense, I keep saying attack, and I'm not going into specifics on that. Obviously, Anthony Black, you could see the effects of that foot injury against Kansas, and they had to rewrap it early in that game, and he just wasn't himself. You hope that he's healthy enough and feeling well enough to play his game, which is getting downhill. Devo Davis and Ricky Council have got to continue to play that way, not settle for threes. Ricky, as good as he's been, both of these guys are around 20 points per game in this tournament. Devo a little north of that, Ricky close. As good as they've been getting downhill, they've also, Ricky, when you look at his percentages, has not shot the ball well. That's okay if he's attacking. You can live with that. Maybe the hope is as you move through it, maybe his confidence continues to pick up, shooting from the field on some of his mid-range shots that he's taking. Now, he did stick 2 or 3. He had a big turnaround late in that Kansas game where I thought he was aggressive and he didn't get all the way to the basket, but he pivoted out and still had a 12-footer off the turnaround, and that worked. You just want to see his efficiency to continue to get better. But the more he gets the line, he's been unbelievable in this tournament. 21 of 23, over 90%. And then Devo Davis has shot the ball well. He's been efficient from 3. The idea there is you don't want any Hog taking a ton of threes. You want to keep that down and keep driving. And I thought both of those guys were just warriors going to the basket. You need more of that. You're hoping Anthony Black and his health allow him to play his game because he can do that. And then a Nick Smith Jr., let's see where things go with him. He's a guy that was battling the flu in the SEC tournament, was getting IV treatments between games. We know he stuck the winner against Auburn, had an efficient game that game, 14 points at the game winner, 6 of 12, started off great, had a big first half against A&M. Arkansas holds a double-digit lead, builds one in that game. And then, I think he missed his last 8 or so shots of the second half, and he's not been the same since offensively. He's had some defensive letdowns as well, but I thought he finished the game well after Devo fouled out. I thought he did a good job, and I thought when he got his minutes, only played 16 after a really rough start defensively and offensively. Instead of shooting the ball, he was still a threat because defenses still have to account for him. But he moved the ball well, and I thought his defense at the end of the game was good. And I thought there were a few things that even he in that role helped Arkansas at the end of that game. So you want your backcourt. This has been the strength of the team all year. You want your backcourt locked in on offense, playing that downhill, and let's get to the line or convert. And I think the other thing is when you look at the front line, Mekhi Mitchell came back to life after the last 3 games of the regular season, started playing good basketball again. Jordan Walsh these last 2 games has evolved his game at both ends of the floor. He's still a little hit and miss on the offensive end. He's gonna hit those offensive boards. He's gonna slash a little bit. Sometimes a little awkward dribble into the basket. He'll pass up threes and dribble. Sometimes there's a mid-range shot and he's not comfortable there, so he'll dribble a little bit more into the teeth of the defense and it becomes a tougher shot. But he's made some really tough baskets. That big 3 I talked about. But I think the other thing when we're talking about him is just keeping the ball alive on offense. You've seen him after a defensive rebound swat at the ball and get a deflection or create havoc back there right after an offensive possession. Defensively, I mean, we talked about Wilson at Kansas, 20 points, but when you saw Devo guarding him, and when Devo wasn't guarding him, it was Jordan Walsh, and both of those guys did an excellent job, especially Walsh, especially in the second half. Knocked the ball, had a big play late in that game to give Arkansas the ball back, slap the ball out of Wilson's hands and off him and out of bounds, force him into some tough shots, and then he has just been a ball hawk, a la Devo Davis, but in that 3-4 combo role. He's been really great at walling off drives, getting deflections again, and just being a menace out there. And the more Arkansas can play that way, the better. Does Arkansas emphasize a racing Caravan and Devo get? So we're going to go through some of these matchups. I know I'm kind of taking a long way to get there because we haven't really gone through the personnel. But when we look at Sanogo, the 2-time first team All Big East, he's an All-American. 17.3 points, 7.5 rebounds, over 60% from the field. He's over 78% from the free throw line, and he can stretch the floor a little bit when we talk about a shot. 17 of 48 from 3, not great, not heavy volume, but it kind of keeps the defense honest at 35%. And what they like to do with him and the other big, the 7-2 guy, is get him out high and pick and roll because they've got 3-point shooters. And they've also got a couple of slashers who'll get in the middle area. So they present a lot of problems. They're not a one-trick pony, and their bigs do a really good job on pick and roll. And so if you're trying to stunt or hedge because of those 3-point shooters, that roll guy, they're big and they're getting downhill and they'll pass. This is a very good passing team. 17.5 assists per game. That ranks 5th in the nation. So they're a good passing team. So they understand how to play. And so their guys will get downhill. But here's the interesting thing about Sanogo. They'll confuse you. They'll run him out like a pick and pop. And though he's really not going to shoot a ton of threes, what happens is when the defenders are trying to account for that guard or that 3-point shooter, he'll be left open and pick and pop. When the ball swings to him, his defender who's playing drop coverage will chase. They'll run out at him because they don't want him to shoot. And he just waits, and he's quick enough. He's quick for a big guy and a good enough handle that he'll go by his guy. Now he's getting downhill. The same with the other big. Those guys will not only off just 2-man game, but they'll set multiple screens at the horns, go from one side to the other. And then off of one pass coming back to their side, they're rolling off that second pick and getting downhill. And a lot of times there's not a lot of help coming. It's really hard when you've got to cover the 3 line and bigs who are capable. And then they've got a couple of guys. When I look at Jackson, the 6'6" forward, he can get in those middle areas and really do damage. He reminds me a little bit of Stanley and Moody, a little of Tony, a little mix of those guys, 6'6", and when he gets around the paint, he's got little finishing angles and shots he can knock down. But they've got multiple guys that can do it different ways. I don't think this team is as athletic across the board as Arkansas. And I think there's some quickness advantages for Arkansas. But they can pick you apart by decisions. They make good decisions and quick decisions. And so I'm looking at the versatility of those big men. they're not, they're not versatile in a sense of a Trevin Brazil, but they're versatile enough, and they're big and strong, and they'll block shots too. These guys, when I look at their footwork in the low post as well, they've got drop steps, both of them. The 7'2" freshman Klingon and Sonoga, they'll drop step on you, and so you've got to be in good positions. Kind of pick your poison. Because if you're playing them to go middle, they're going to drop step you. They're going to feel that and drop. And they can finish those. That's why Arkansas is going to have to be sound and help. Been Arkansas's poet warrior. Ricky Council 1, Devo 1, Council 1A. And I really think, if I had to pick a third guy that's meant so much to Arkansas, it's maybe Jordan Walsh and a good argument for Kamani Johnson, who, when you look at his minutes, 12 against Illinois, 19 against Kansas. You add up the rebounds, 15 rebounds and basically 31 minutes of playing time. That says everything. And most of those on the offensive glass. He's been dominant, timely stickbacks, clutch. He sets a tone with his physicality. We're talking about some of the matchup issues here, trying to defend UConn. Does Eric Musselman decide to stick with what's worked with his lineup, setting that tone? Does he put a Mitchell in? Does he put Mackay in to start the game? Because Arkansas, is going to need some size. Oh, does Arkansas try? I think Arkansas has a quickness advantage. Do you go with Kamani, who's going to battle? But this team, when I look at Kansas, UConn, it's not just that this team's 8th in offensive rebounds, 13.2, but they're 18th in total rebounds, 38 point, almost 39 per game. But the other thing this does is their opposition, the teams they play, are only getting just under 21 defensive rebounds per game. That ranks 4th in college basketball. That means the percentage is really high. So it's hard. Not only are they getting offensive rebounds, but they're able to limit teams from rebounding well at all. And so defensively, and so that keeps you from getting possessions. Arkansas needs possessions. Arkansas needs to get as many shots up on goal as possible and get downhill to do it. And one way to do that is to get some turnovers. Arkansas will give it back. So you can't count on a big win there. Arkansas has won that battle the last 2 games. We're going to have to be very mindful of the offensive glass. Well, Arkansas has been lights out offensive glass in this tournament so far, but we've seen them against certain matchups where teams are really good. This one's really good where they haven't been so great. Again, the problems, I've said it, it's not just the putback opportunities, it's the extended possessions and the fewer opportunities for the Razorbacks, which puts pressure on an offense that is really overall very one-dimensional. Not only is it not a great three-point shooting team, it's really not an effective mid-range shooting. You don't see a lot of craft in the mid-range. Arkansas's got to get to the basket. They got to get in that paint. And you got to hope that Devo and Ricky and Nick's got runners and pull-up game. AB, not as much, but he's got, he's shown a little bit, even kind of toward the end of the season. He's knocked down a couple of mid-range shots, a couple of floaters, adding a little bit more. He doesn't really have a pet move, but Arkansas needs that. I think Jordan Walsh, it could be an X factor again in defending guys like Jackson and helping out on the bigs. I don't know how they're going to use him exactly and who he's going to match up with. You talked about Caravan. This is something else. We haven't even mentioned the guards, Hawkins and Newton. These guys are bombers from 3. Caravan is 6'8". And they're very interesting. They're spot-up guys. They'll shoot off the bounce, but they'll also shoot behind a screener. You don't see a lot of that outside of the NBA. You see it some in college. These guys will shoot behind the screener. The screener is not, a lot of times it's to get a guy open in a way to create space, but they got enough space because of the way, especially that 6'8" Caravan, he can see over his screener. So the screener keeps the defender from closing and getting a hand up, and now he's shooting over a screener. And they are very effective in the film I watched at some of that. They do unique things relative to what Arkansas's used to seeing. And so this is a tough matchup for the Razorbacks. I actually like Arkansas in this game. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think another tight game. And I think Arkansas, in my opinion, I think the way Arkansas's taken the fight in these games, if they can understand there may be something about the defense you don't like, but don't bail out by shooting early shot clock threes. Get downhill, attack, be aggressive. I think Arkansas, when I look at one of the areas that has been talked about, but probably hasn't been as big of an issue because Arkansas won both games, they've got a total of 12 assists in this tournament. It tells you that guys are just going off the dribble and attacking. Arkansas needs to play in attack mode. But at some point, you've got to be ready to pass off of those drives. I thought Ricky Council did a really good job off some of his drives against Kansas in that game, especially early. When the help came, he dumped down the guys that were cutting behind on the other side to the basket. This is too savvy of team, and they've got depth and other stuff. Arkansas is going to have to be smart with the basketball. And when you get downhill and drive, that doesn't mean the same guy who's driving has to shoot every time or try to draw a foul every time. You can dump down and dish off. And I thought that made Ricky even more dangerous. And a guy like Devo can do that and has done it. AB has done it. You want Mekhi Mitchell rolling hard and catching passes off two-man game and finishing. Arkansas's got to continue to play that way. Same with Jordan. Jordan's got behind the defense in the dunker spot. Jordan Walston has been really good. Defense. I'm seeing the comments roll in. Absolutely. Arkansas has been shaky toward the end of the regular season in defense. Also in the SEC tournament, there were times in these games where there were lapses on defense, but they were small doses, not big runs and not just huge second half collapses, more in doses. Arkansas was the team that made the comeback down 12 in the second half against Kansas. So this is a team that's figured out some things. But yeah, Arkansas's defense is going to have to be sound. I think I've talked about some of the issues dealing with the big men off pick and roll and pick and pop, shooting over screeners. They got multiple guys that can knock down threes. And so Arkansas has done a really good job. I talked about how good UConn is defending the three. Arkansas similar. Arkansas has been good at that, limiting the amount, because Arkansas is not going to make very many. So what do you got to do? You want to keep your opponent from making a lot. But sometimes you pick your poison. Arkansas, we've seen crafty, quick guards get downhill on Arkansas and get leverage, and then they're picking and choosing as passers or finishers. I don't know that this team that Arkansas is playing has that kind of quickness advantage. Now it becomes how savvy are they? How quick are they in their proactive moves to get by your guy? And now they're playing pick and choose off leverage. So there's different ways to get it. Arkansas's got to be solid in not only defending that three line, but you got to account for the bigs rolling and popping off of it. And there's multiple screens going on both sides, I noticed, with this team. And so it may not be that next pass off the action. It may be one or two more passes and they find somebody open. That makes it really tough on a defense for a team that assists as much as this team does and can beat you inside out. And this is a team that can do that. The third rated offense in the country, I went through the assists. And the 3-point shooting's good. There's a lot of things about it that's good. And they're defensively, they're top 20, just like Arkansas. Outside the top 10, but inside the top 20. So we can go through. We've gone through a lot of the players here. Some of the guys' names I didn't mention. Diarra was a transfer from A&M. He's a guy that defensively gave Arkansas fits in the past with his ability to steal. We haven't faced a ton of big guys this year. Even Castleton was out. Sheboy isn't a big. I mean, Sheboy's 6'9". He's. This other guy looks a little bigger to me, and I think they list him at 6'9". He might, if Sheboy's 6'9" and this guy is, I think this guy might actually be a little bigger in terms of height than the 7'2" guy. Arkansas, no, they haven't. But I don't think there's a huge quickness advantage. I think Sanogo has some quickness relative to his size, but if you play him right, you can eat that up. And I think you give him just a little bit of cushion when he's away from the basket and don't close so hard on him so that he uses that quick dribble because he's savvy to get by you. You want to give him a little cushion, maybe dare him to shoot or pass the ball. He's not a good enough shooter that you'll live with giving up some of that. I think you drop off of him when you can out there on the floor. Cover up those three guys, but just make sure that he doesn't have a wide lane to roll on. That's one of the dangers when you play off a little bit. So you got to find a sweet spot in there with those guys. And then when you help, he might pay. If this guy backs you down or gets low, if you bring help because you're worried about the drop step or his abilities, a 61% field goal shooter, to get it up to the rim and in, and you bring help, that means they're one or two passes away from an open three, or someone diving down into that free throw line extended into the middle of the paint, mid post area. They got guys that are crafty in multiple ways. And so Arkansas is going to have to be. That's why I think Arkansas being aggressive on offense. I kept talking about that attack. On defense, they're going to have to find ways to get into these guys and maybe force some turnovers or disrupt possessions. It's hard to do with a team that moves it well, but if you can disrupt and blow up some of that two-man stuff and get guys just a little out of their spots that they like, then there can be some discomfort there, and then some of that efficiency on offense, you can chip away at that. And I think the other thing is Arkansas fouls a lot, and this is a kind of team. The way it moves the ball was what I was worried about. Kansas, Arkansas ends up winning that foul battle when you looked at the free throws. I mean, they took one more free throw in that game. Yes, some of those were late when they were there to extend the game, and we're getting fouled. But Arkansas was fouling on the other end too to not give up a 3-point shot. So it kind of went back and forth. You want Arkansas to be competitive in those free throws attempted game, and so you want to play great defense. If you foul this team, they're going to make you pay. It's over 75% at the line. So we've gone through some stuff here. When we look at these matchups again, I at the end of it, I favor Arkansas to win. I think it's going to be another gut check and another close game. Look, they have the common opponents. UConn blew out Alabama at a neutral site. The PK 80 or whatever they call it now, the Phil Knight Invitational in November. So it's a long time ago. We know what Arkansas did against Bama. Stayed in both games late, lost. Both teams played Florida. 21-point win for UConn in non-conference. Arkansas late in conference play beats Florida by 19 at home, but Castleton was gone. So if you really want to look at common opponents, advantage UConn, this is a team that blows teams out most of the year. I mean, it's plus 14 points per game. Limiting teams to under 65 points a game, scoring nearly 79 points a game. Arkansas is like plus 7 or 8 on its when you look at margin for the season. So this is a UConn team when it gets and if you look at the tournament, both of these teams, Iona, the 13 seed, St. Mary's, the 5 seed, both of those teams were competitive, held leads in the first half, close games at halftime, and then UConn just continues to solve defenses and figure out ways to win on defense and it really puts pressure once they start snowballing some of those advantages. That's going to be the danger, even if Arkansas is competitive for a half, is understand UConn knows how to not only put teams away, but win soundly. The difference is Iona and St. Mary's do not bring a smidgen of what Arkansas does when we start talking about athleticism, physical strength, some of Arkansas's positional size. And I think Arkansas can use a lot of that to its advantage. And the way that they've solved some of their issues, if they play like they did, especially to the final 10 minutes against Kansas and most of the game against Illinois, if Arkansas has a stretch like that at the end of this game, I think it puts Arkansas in a great position to win. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think Arkansas is going to figure out a way to once again overcome whatever weaknesses we start to see play out. Early in the game against Kansas, the Jayhawks were better in transition. The Jayhawks were, getting Arkansas to settle for 3 attempts, and that favored Kansas. That's why that team built leads, led by 8 at halftime, led by 12 early in that second half. And Arkansas finally said, no, we're going to be the tougher team. We should be the tougher team. We're going to be the more physical team. And we're going to use that athleticism, quickness advantage. And I think they have a lot of that in a lot of positions against this opponent. I really do. Obviously, St. Mary's versus UConn was one of the widest basketball games. So, there's different styles too. I mean, the West Coast teams, this is going to sound funny, but to me, they're more of a finesse style. A lot of threes, a lot of European, the old European style basketball, and smart basketball, but also, more finesse. And Arkansas can play a brand that's attack and has done that in this tournament for the most part. All right, I said I was going to switch gears a little bit, so I'm going to predict. I'm not going to do a score prediction. I guess I could. I'll drop that. I'm going to go ahead and give it to Arkansas, 75-71. Arkansas beats UConn in the Sweet 16 and moves on to their third, the Razorbacks' third consecutive Elite Eight. That's a new standard for the program if it happens. And then Arkansas's got everything in front of it still and would meet at that point the winner of UCLA and Gonzaga in that other West Region Sweet 16 matchup. Recruiting, Arkansas has been very busy in the portal. You know that. They contact a lot of folks. We were the first to report that Arkansas not only had reached out to Cameron Hunter, Bryant native, played with KK Robinson, former Hog at Bryant, has spent the last 2 years at UCA, competed against the Razorbacks 2 years ago at Bud Walton Arena, had 12 points, 4 steals, 5 rebounds, had a nice game, a couple of assists. But a strong backcourt piece, 6'3" guard. He's in the portal. He's got several schools. He had an in-home tonight with Butler, in-home visit. Took an unofficial visit to Arkansas on Monday before the Hogs got out of town to go to Las Vegas. But Cam Hunter's a guy that, there's some schools pursuing him and several high majors, Minnesota, Nebraska. I mentioned Butler, Texas A&M, Auburn, Mississippi State. There's multiple schools that have reached out to Cam. But he really enjoyed that visit. We had a big article on that. Got some photos out from his visit. You know how they do it up there. He puts the uniform on and he takes photos with Muss and the coaching staff, and he loved it. He said that they were really honest with him about how they saw his fit with them, with the program. He said they told him that they wanted him to be a part of the program. And so, when you look at, talking about the experience of the coaching staff of the NBA, different things, he was very pleased with everything he heard. And I think he's going to be on a fast track to make a decision. Let's see, he told me 3 to 4 weeks. There may be something coming out tomorrow. I don't expect a commitment. But maybe something comes out tomorrow when you start talking about where things go, because so far he didn't have any other visits planned, and he did have Butler coming in home, like I said, tonight. And so maybe there'll be some updates tomorrow. Another Arkansas native, when I look at Freddie Hicks, 6'5", wing, small forward wing, pushing 6'6", out of Searcy, has been at D1 Tarleton State in Texas the last 2 years. Was the WAC, Western Athletic Conference Freshman of the Year 2 years ago, averaged over 16 points a game this year, and a stat sheet stuffer. Muss has been talking to him. He told me 4 of Arkansas's assistants have been communicating with him, including Muss, who he spoke to by phone. But he's a guy that's already starting to hear from schools. He just went in the portal. So another in-state guy, but there's a lot of players. 2 or 3 more names I'm going to sit on right now where I think things are advancing a little bit with maybe. We know last year the Trevor Brazile thing happened really fast, and it was kind of quiet. Some of that stuff comes out stealth and sneaky. The year, Vance Jackson was out of the blue. There wasn't any kind of detail, initial contact detail that got out in social media or actual media before those things kind of hit pretty quick. And so that stuff can happen. Trying to keep up with all of that, but those are big, that's big news in recruiting to me, because we've advanced now with some of this information beyond initial contact. We actually know there's repetition in some of that contact, and now we've had an unofficial visit. We'll see what happens. I'm not predicting Cam Hunter to Arkansas. I think we need to see who else comes in the portal. Arkansas is still playing its season. As a fan base, you've got to love this coaching staff, can chew gum and walk at the same time. They can recruit. Well, you got a ton of teams that don't reach out to begin with as many as Arkansas does. And a lot of these programs are finished with their season. What else are they doing? And Arkansas is able to juggle all of that and do it at a high level. So there's a lot of movement there. Real deal on the Rock this weekend. There's going to be every year there's just top-notch talent from across the country that plays in this event. We've got several from in-state, Terrion Burgess, Kayon or Boateng. These guys, recruiting continues to pick up for those guys. I feel really good with Arkansas and Burgess. I think Arkansas is also in a good spot with Boateng, but I think with Burgess, I think, I'm not going to say that he's a lean, but I think Arkansas is in a great spot. And I know that, he's been on campus multiple times for games this year. Arkansas is one of the top 4 or 5 schools in terms of how hard they're recruiting him or how aggressive they've been with him. And I know that he appreciates that. And so I think things are great there, but we're going to get to see these guys as they enter spring and summer. It's different than the high school season. These guys start matching up again with some of the best players around the country. I'll be able to do that. I stayed back instead of traveling to Vegas. I'm going to be going back and forth between covering the Hogs and being at Real Deal on the Rock. It's something I cover every year. And as much as I'd have liked to have gone to Vegas and looked at that, I made the decision to stay back and do both. Well, obviously I can't be in Vegas, but I'll be covering the Hogs like I always do. But I'm going to be getting out to Real Deal. And so we're going to see what Boateng and Burgess are able to do matching up with some of these programs. Like Compton Magic, who are going to bring 2 or 3 of the top players in the country. And there's others. But it's all a great event if you're in Central Arkansas, can go in between following the Hogs and the tournament and other things. It's a great chance to come out and see not only the in-state guys, but Arkansas coaches are aware of some of these other guys, and they're recruiting them as well. And so I can't wait to see some of that. But when I look at portal in high school, Arkansas continues not only to cast the wide net, but have success. We know Bay Fall and Layden Blocker, guess what? Both of those guys will be moved into campus in 2 months, end of May, first couple of days of June. That's how it works every year. We're 2 months out from that. 2 5-stars from the 2023 class. The portal is going to be the next part of that. In the meantime, you're recruiting 24, 25, and beyond. And so all these things are going on, and Arkansas staff pays attention to all of it and does a great job with it. It's really fun this time of year when your team's still competing, isn't it, Razorback fans? Because there was so much expectation on this team coming in. The preseason rankings were all about that. And I think now you want more, obviously. You want to move the needle and do even better than Elite Eights the last 2 years. But you got to win this one first to get to another Elite Eight. You got to do that. Obviously, the old cliche, it's one game at a time. There are no matchups that are easy, especially in this West region. Arkansas will have to have gone through, obviously, the 9, so a comparable seed to the Razorbacks, through a 1, the 4, and a 2 or a 3. I mean, they don't have double-digit seeds like they had the last 2 years. 2. They had 4 games in the last 2 NCAA tournaments, went 3-1 in each. And in each one of those 4-game runs, they had 2 matchups against double-digit seeded teams. They're not going to have a single one of those in the West region. They might. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at it, but they'd have to, knock off a double-digit seed somewhere else, and that's not going to happen at this point. So it's just not on the menu this year. But the Arkansas Razorbacks, it's tomorrow. We're less than a day away now. No take double-digit win tomorrow. 81-68 Hogs. Well, there you go. In Must We Trust. Let's get some of these comments. Some of them are rolling in. As usual, I don't do the best job with it. I'm part blind when it comes to it anyway. And then I sit far back. Yeah, that's a hot take. Okay, double-digit win. There's some other ones that are up there, but they're faded too much. I think Arkansas, well, it went away. Maybe it'll come back up. I do. I think if you look at UConn, they do so many things very well and we know what Arkansas's weaknesses have been. To the point where you're like, well, this is a tough matchup. I think it is. I think in some ways it might be in its own way, but, Arkansas didn't have a ton of matchup advantages against Tennessee and got clocked. I don't know that it's quite that pronounced, and it's not for the same reasons, but teams that can throw multiple things at you and they're not one or two trick pony, it's harder to deal with. And we know Arkansas tends to make mistakes, self-inflicted wounds. That's why you love to see the fact that not only did Arkansas, even though they didn't eliminate all of it, they were just better than the opponent when you talked rebounds, turnovers, free throw line. If Arkansas combines any 2 of those 3 as wins against UConn, they're very good chance they're going to win that game just based on the merit of that. But I think the other thing is, while I don't expect Arkansas to take everything away from UConn, you can't do that with any team really. I do think there's an opportunity for Arkansas to not only win the 3-point battle in terms of not getting clobbered. I mean, UConn's making over 9 a game, almost double Arkansas. But shrink that down, keep their efficiency. It's at 36% now. I don't even know if you need to shrink that down a ton as long as you're keeping the makes down. And if you're keeping the makes down, the efficiency probably is because they're going to take them. So that probably comes down too. But if you limit them, even if you limit them and the percentages stay the same, get them down, shrink that down closer to what Arkansas is expected to do. At best, 4 or 5 makes probably. They could have one of those insane games where they make 10, but there weren't many of those. And that's not their game, and and UConn's good at defending the 3-line. Arkansas needs to attack, man. And it's easy to say that every game out. That's what they should do no matter the matchup. That's always the point. And I think, I'm repeating some of the stuff I said before, but maybe some folks join in a little later. But I do hope, it's Hogvillenet YouTube Live. I hope you go to our website, hogville.net, check out the written content. Dudley Dawson in baseball, he's very, very busy. Otis Kirk, football's year-round. We know that he's busy. How do we match up athletically overall? I think better. I think Arkansas is the more athletic, more explosive, the quicker team, maybe the faster team in terms of individual, getting downhill point A to point B. UConn plays with good pace. And they'll look to run. I mean, this is a team averaging literally 79 points a game. But as individual pieces, I think Arkansas has advantages there. And I'm not sure, I didn't see enough, and I need to see more. I'm really not sure just how skilled they are as creating shots for themselves and others off the bounce. They're very good at creating shots for each other, and they move the ball well.